Hello, everyone. Welcome back or welcome to the Field Advisor podcast. If this is your first time hearing us, I'm so glad you're here today. Today, I have a familiar voice, familiar face if you're watching us on YouTube. He's a former soy envoy that served with us last year in 2025, and I heard there were some beans popping up in his neck of the woods. So Mike Wilson, he's the Specialty Products Marketing Manager and CCA with the Wabash
There you go.
Valley Service Company. I told Mike before we started recording, I said, nothing gets me more tripped up for some reason, and people are going to laugh at me, than saying Wabash, because I always want to say it a different way. But I'm not even going to say it out loud because then I'm going to trip myself again. So we'll just move past that. But Mike, thanks for being here. I saw your text message thread. What a year makes for Southern Illinois, where you are in Southeastern Illinois, of last year too much rain, now you're begging for rain.
Yeah, it's pretty dry. We 2 weeks ago Sunday, I mowed my yard for the first time. I mowed in March. I never mow in March, and it was like mowing in September. There was dusty. There was dust flying everywhere. I was running over mole runs. My yard, we had such a mild winter. We had a few weeks of rough cold, but my yard looks like it's been tiled on 2-foot centers. There's so many mole runs through it. But it's really dry. We've been planting for almost 2.5 weeks. Here where I sit in Wabash County, we're about 85% done with pre-plant ammonia. Dry fertilizer is probably 85-90% done. Most of the company, talked to Dimitri Krajak yesterday, the marketing manager for the company. We're 75% done pre-plant ammonia company-wide. So that's 10 counties. Dry fertilizers in the same shape, just going really, really fast.
What about fertilizer prices? Has that stopped anyone, or is it all prepaid, or what's the status there?
Most of it's prepaid. We told Dimitri the other day that it must be, it doesn't take him very long to raise fertilizer prices, because it seems like we get an email about every other day. And we do have some being priced on the spot, but not a lot. Most fortunately, we're really, really, really a heavy prepay here, and early, make early decisions. And we got the vast majority of all that taken care of before this craziness hit. Mm-hmm. So we're really, our growers are in really pretty good shape. There's still some cash stuff out there, but current stuff, but not very much. Most guys understand that they want to get that they want to take that opportunity to lock that in. Mm-hmm. And this year it really paid off big, because we're, I don't know, $300 a ton higher on ammonia than we were December, maybe more. I don't really look at fertilizer prices as much, because that's not my thing. But when it goes over $1,100 a ton, I start paying attention. Mm-hmm. Phosphates have really been, really following suit. Dimitri said he's had enough practice raising fertilizer prices to raise fertilizer prices and send all the emails for the entire company. It used to take 20 minutes. He can now do it in 2.
Yeah.
So practice makes perfect, I guess.
Yeah.
So we've dealt with that. I was talking to Steve, the plant manager here at Allendale, this morning, and they are already struggling to get potash. We normally bring unit trains into our McLeansboro facility, and you have to stage those trains weeks in advance. And no one saw this coming, being done basically going to be done spreading dry fertilizer the second week of April if we miss this rain the first week. So we're waiting on a unit train of potash coming out of Saskatchewan, and we're out. So we're having to struggle around. Steve was told that the 4 loads he may get today may be red, and then he got a call and said it'll still be Kalium white. So yeah, we're already starting to run into shortages. Down here in our end of the world, Memphis ammonia plant was offline early. So a lot of our southern locations that we pull ammonia out of, like Henderson, Kentucky, and Mount Vernon, Indiana, were overwhelmed with trucks out of Tennessee, Arkansas, and Kentucky. that normally would have gone to Memphis to load. So that kind of got us behind the 8 ball for a little bit, but our trucking company that works with us threw more trucks on it, and they were sitting in line 5.5, 6 hours. Wow. And still keeping us in ammonia. So I'm pretty pleased with the way spring's gone so far. And boy, it's sure different than last year. I mean, we were the 1st of June still trying to get fertilizer spread.
Right.
So,
And you said beans are popping up at the ground. So what's the ratio of beans to corn down there right now?
Ratio of beans to corn planted?
Yeah.
I'd say there's 3 acres of beans planted for every acre of corn.
Okay.
Depending on the area. But there's a lot of beans in the ground. I talked to a grower that was a farmer, my neighbor, one of my friends was in here earlier. And he said they've been planting beans for 5 days. 5 or 6 days. His son plants the beans. He plants the corn. And he said they finally convinced him he needs to get started planting corn today. So he thought he'd go home and maybe this afternoon pull the corn planter out. So we've got more and more of a focus of getting these beans out early. And kind of the hotbed of that in Wabash County is in the southern part, down south and around Bellwood State Park. So I took off a trip down through the river bottoms yesterday on my way back from Grayville. And I was amazed how many acres of beans were up. I'd heard rumors, but I had to see it myself. So I got out and you saw the pictures. I got out and took some pictures of beans and the first true leaves starting to emerge. And I heard there were some beans planted in February. So I really went down there expecting to see blooms, but I was kind of disappointed in that. But it was, and last year at this time where I was at, was under 10 feet of water. So and then, people listening are going to go, holy cow, 10 feet of water. Well, I was, 300 yards from the Wabash River. It's behind the levee, but still backwater fills it up. So those guys take a lot of chances, but boy, they know that getting those soybeans planted early is going to benefit them in the long run.
I was just looking at the drought monitor here. It says abnormally dry. Mm-hmm. South is more in the D1 moderate drought. So you're dry, but it's not, it could be worse.
It could be worse. Yes, it was worse, 6 weeks ago, 8 weeks ago. We came through winter so terribly dry. It was, we got about 12, 14 inches of snow there 1 week. And the kids were out of school some of the kids were out of school for almost two full weeks because we couldn't do anything with it. And when we thawed out and, the roads didn't even get soft. There was not enough moisture in the county roads and the gravel roads and the chip and seals to even get soft. I mean, we still posted them, but normally when you come out from under a snow like that with, freezing temperatures, we were below freezing, I think, for right at a month. And the roads weren't soft. Well, that has to be lack of moisture is all it can be. Mm-hmm. So, those were some other indications. But it's still dry. But, we depend on timely rains here anyway. We're always 3 days from a drought. So we're always dependent on timely rains.
Is there rain in the forecast for you? Or you talked about maybe missing it, so
we've got
not big hopes.
Well, of course, if you're in this business, you're looking at every weather source, information source, so
whether they're credible or not.
Yeah.
Twitter does not count, in my opinion.
So I got AccuWeather on my phone. I've got 2 television stations in Evansville, Indiana, that have really good meteorologists, except the sky's falling, that just drives me nuts. We're in a 3 out of 5 risk for thunderstorms. Okay, we're going to get a thunderstorm. We've been getting thunderstorms. Anyway, I kind of get, when they
I hear you, Mike. We could go down a rabbit hole so bad there, but I'm refraining from doing it.
So you feel my pain. You understand what I'm saying.
I do.
When it's more of a way to boost ratings than it is to get information out to people. I struggle with that.
Or scare people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you got to watch me because we're going to keep you from blowing away like Dorothy Gale. So, but but anyway, I've got a couple that I watch that I trust, and they just keep pushing things back into next week. We were originally supposed to get maybe quarter to half inch on Friday, which the guys here were ecstatic about because that means Saturday off. But now we've got like a 30% chance of a tenth on Friday, and then they were giving us rain for Sunday, and thankfully we missed the rains Easter Sunday, because Easter Sunday you get rain 7 following Sundays. You ever heard that one?
Yes, but then I hear a lot about Mother's Day too.
Really?
Yeah, you shouldn't plant on Mother's Day or something like that. Maybe that's a more northern thing.
Yeah, you're supposed to be done by Mother's Day. So
yeah,
but they just keep pushing us back and dropping the amounts, and they've been doing that for about 3 weeks. We were last weekend we were supposed to get up to about a 4-day period there. They had us in a 3 to 3.5 inches of rain over 4 or 5 days, and we ended up with 7/10. And it really concerns me that we're in April and we did the same thing in March, that we're missing these rains. We shouldn't be missing those rains this time of year. Now that tells me one of two things. We're either going to make up for it when we need it and its crop's going to be great, or but one of 3 things. It's never going to rain again, or when it starts, it's going to wipe us out. We'll get 6 inches of rain in 2 days. So, typical farmer here. I'm Mr. Optimistic. So,
well, looking on Facebook, meteorologist Nick Housen, it says he's a digital meteorologist serving Southern Illinois. He says Southern Illinois is well below average for the year. Over the next 10 days, the probability of at least 1 inch of rainfall is below 50%, which isn't great in the middle of April. So, you're doing your rain dance.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
We really, and the thing is, it depends on who you talk to. You talk to one farmer and it's like, yeah, we need a rain. I'd shut the planter down for a rain. And you talk to the next farmer, well, I'd like to get another 80 planted, or I'd like to get that, I'd like to get everything but the river bottoms planted before it rains. Or, well, I'd like to get the river bottoms planted so that if it rains, I don't have to worry about getting back in there unless I have to replant. So, it's just like opinions. The way people farm is different for everybody. So they all have different ways they want to do things.
How did those beans look out of the ground? Are they looking decent, or do they look like they need a drink of water?
They look fine. They really look fine. The one thing I noticed with some of them was that 30 degrees we got the other night had, kind of purpled them up a little bit. But the true leaves coming out look great. So I think they'll be fine. And honestly, probably 75 or 80% of the beans I looked at that are coming up are under irrigation. So if push comes to shove, they can water them.
Yeah. What about wheat? How's the wheat looking down there?
Where it's good, it's really good. Where we didn't have a stand, as good a stand coming in, we didn't tiller maybe like I'd like to seen. I'm gonna attribute that to lack of moisture. Wheat normally likes dry. It's a drier land, drier climate crop. But I think our lack of moisture actually hurt us on our tillering. We did get some frost injury the other night when it's been back in mid-March. We got down to like 17 for a low. And 2 days before that, we'd had a high of 89. And we did get a little, So we did get a little frost injury. I think we were still close. We were just coming out of dormancy. And I went out and looked at the fields with our salesman. And we went in and went ahead and did the second pass of UAN and AMS. And we threw a half a gallon of a humic product in there, and it greened up in 2 days. It really, that liquid humic, if we throw that in, it really seems to reduce the burn on the wheat. And we really didn't see anything slowing that wheat down. And within 4 or 5 days, you couldn't even hardly, unless you got out and looked, you couldn't find the frost injury.
Mm-hmm.
But most of it was where that leaf bends. The leaf gets its little arc in it, and where that frost settled on that arc and the sunshine hit it, it was just one little band on that. It was frost injury on wheat's always a little weird looking.
Mm-hmm.
But the grower thought it was hail injury because he didn't get out and look at it. It was just starting to turn brown. We had a pretty good hail storm when it went from 89 to 17 in 2 days. So I went and looked at it, but it was fine. Wheat looks fantastic now, but we are struggling with some stand quality in some of our wheat fields.
Mm-hmm. So with that, everything going on, down in your region, looking for rain, but obviously a more decent start, definitely a better decent start than a year ago. What are farmers asking you, like question wise? Like, you're dealing with everything that's happening with the fertilizer, the diesel prices, everything. And I'm at a lot of attentions on economics right now, understandably. But, as a CCA, any advice that you're getting them on the agronomic side as well? I know people are talking a lot about, looking at soil tests and try not to cut back or, herbicide, things like that. What advice are you giving them?
Okay, we talked about this very thing in the last 2 or 3 weeks on our radio broadcast. Do a radio broadcast every Wednesday on a local radio station, and we're starting to get into social media and calling it a podcast. But anyway, we're having some fun with that. Yeah, I've been doing this radio show for about 11 years, and but one of the things that we talked about on the show was priorities. Where do we set priorities? And my priority is you always, the first choice you make is the best genetics you can afford. Now, I can't tell you what that is. Each individual grower has to look at his operation and decide what he can afford to put on this acre and that acre. And maybe if you're going into river bottoms and you got a 50% chance you're going to have to replant, you look at the company with the best replant policy more than you look at yield potential. But on your better ground, you look at yield potential and herbicide tolerances and all that. There's so many decisions that go into genetics today, but my blanket recommendation is plant the best genetics you can afford for that acre. Then herbicide, weed control, pest control has to come next. It's probably the most important decision you make, but it's the second decision, in my opinion, you should make. If you choose not to apply fertilizer and you have excellent residual soil fertility, you're going to rob some nutrients if you don't replace it that you're going to have to replace eventually, but you can replace it. And if you're like down here, if you're running a 50 to 70 pounds per acre P test and a 250 to 280, 310 K test, you can afford to be a little more frugal in your fertilizer application because you can always go back and fix it. If you have a herbicide failure or you try to skimp on controlling weeds, you're going to pay for that for the next 10 years. So that should be the single most important decision you make. And the biggest priority you give for your dollars is to make sure you control the weeds. Fungicide, insecticides, all that is just that's by field, by variety, by crop decisions that CCAs are here to help with. But regardless of what else you're doing in management, you got to control the weeds, because if you have water hemp or Palmer amaranth, or, I can remember when Johnson grass was the big deal, and with the advent of Roundup Ready crops, Johnson grass isn't near the weed it was 40 years ago, 30 years ago even. Giant ragweeds, the large seeded broadleaves are not the problem. that they once were. But these amaranth species, these productive reproducing little boogers, just tear us up. And it doesn't take much of a herbicide failure that you've got a mess for the next 10 years. So that's what we're talking about.
Mm-hmm. You hear more farmers talking about doing generics. Thoughts on that? Things to be careful of if they're going to make that switch from name brand to something more generic.
Okay, now here we go. I'm going to sound like the typical ag retailer, but I don't care what active you use. I don't care if you buy name brand product. I'm specialty products. I don't deal with the chemical companies much. If you are using a quality active ingredient manufactured by a reputable source that you have used in the past, I don't have a problem with it. The differences that you're going to have between some of the generics and some of the branded, their branded is going to have a quality active ingredient, or it's going to have a quality active, it's going to have a quality adjuvant or carrier that maximizes that active's ability to control what you're trying to control. Does that make sense?
Yeah. How do you know it's good quality?
Because that's the basic manufacturers. If you're dealing with Corteva, Syngenta, Bayer, BASF, FMC, that's what they're hanging their hat on. They're putting the product, they're putting the carriers and the emulsifiers and the adjuvants into those products to give their product the best opportunity to perform, or they better be, or everyone's going to be using generics. Okay. Now, once again, this is my opinion, Kelsey. So it's worth what you paid for it.
That's why we're having a podcast.
Okay. The generics, the only issue I have with the generics is you have to make sure that it's getting where it's supposed to go, and that's inside the plant to kill that weed. Okay. So you need to make sure, and there's no regulation, there's no oversight. I would rather, oh boy, here we go. I would rather see a grower buy a generic crop protection product with an active ingredient in it than buy the cheapest version of an adjuvant he can buy. Does that make sense? Because I can fix, if it tells me it's a 4L atrazine product, I know there's 4 pounds of atrazine per gallon, or they're fraudulent and they're going to end up, EPA is going to hammer them. But if it says a 4L atrazine product, I know that's what's in there. If I buy a 90% non-ionic surfactant, and I buy the cheapest non-ionic surfactant I can buy, and I know this because we've had them tested, it may be 60% because there's no regulation and no oversight. There's no EPA establishment number on that. So buy the adjuvant you need to do the job. And there's generic, all adjuvants are generic because everyone makes one. Buy one you trust. Don't just buy it because it's cheap. The other thing, and this isn't as big a deal as it was 25 years ago, if you're going to put add-ons in, if you're going to do boron foliar, you're going to do zinc foliar, you're going to do manganese foliar, make sure you're using good products. Don't buy something that's going to make snot or cottage cheese, or we actually had a zinc product that one of our competitors sold 25 years ago that ruined the pump. It galvanized in the tank. They had to buy pumps on the sprayer, replace tanks on the sprayers because
that's going to be expensive.
So make sure you buy a quality product. And I know every ag distributor in North America, and I'm not going to list them because I don't care if I forget a couple of them, but makes an adjuvant line. Make sure you're getting a good quality adjuvant.
Yeah.
And there's really no way to know it other than you've used it before. But just don't.
Read the label.
Read the label. And a lot of times on the adjuvants, the labels, they'll tell you one thing, but there's no way to know that's what's in there.
Mm-hmm.
So just be diligent with that. The adjuvant you use has more of a using the appropriate adjuvant will have more impact on your herbicide results than whether you buy a generic or a branded active in most cases. Now I'm going to get calls from Bayer and BASF and all those guys, but and there's other benefits.
Yeah.
There's other benefits to using branded product. You're not going to get, if you apply a product on label and you do everything right and it fails, generics, you're gone. You're done. If with a branded product, you at least have the chance of a respray claim. Mm-hmm. But but generics, you're done. They're not going to back anything. So that's another reason to use branded.
Yeah. Well, speaking of equipment outside of, just the chemical itself, setting it up for your success, Eric Beckett and I talked about a week ago, the wind year conditions, like things you need to make sure the environment you're putting that product in is working for you and not against you as well. So that is another side of the equation to consider.
While we're on that, I'm going to get on my soapbox for just a minute. And I am very apprehensive about over-the-top applications of dicamba on soybeans. Make sure you are using an approved product. Don't go buy a generic product and use it over the top of off-label, over the top of genetically modified soybeans because it's cheaper. Because the lawsuit you could be facing or the penalties you could be facing from USDA and Illinois Department of Ag and Illinois EPA are not worth the risk. Mm-hmm. An off-label application of a generic product can get you in a lot of trouble. Mm-hmm. So just be careful with that. The branded products for the dicamba tolerant and 2,4-D tolerant products, seeds, you need to use what's labeled. Mm-hmm. You can save a little money in the short term, but if something goes wrong and you kill a neighbor's crop or you kill a neighbor's orchard or you kill a neighbor's, trust me, you kill a lady's chrysanthemums or roses that she has spent her life developing that line, that is not a pleasant conversation.
Yeah, near one of the farm fields we have, dicamba drift must have got on one of his trees and killed it somehow. I don't know that for a fact, but he cut it down and then part of the stump he wrote on it "Death by Dicamba," and that was like advertised in front of his house, and he kept it there for a while. But to go off that topic down to Stephanie Porter, who's the agronomist at Illinois Soy, she just wrote an article about dicamba details for 2026. So if you are using dicamba, I highly recommend go to Field Advisor. It's still on our homepage, or you can just search the word dicamba and it'll pop up, because we've had meetings with our government relations team here at Illinois Soybean, Aaron Hager, about some of the call outs to be aware of. And they're really pushing documentation too, because if you do not document it correctly and IDOA comes to you and you don't have it, big fines are in order. So they're going through with all of that.
I have been on both sides of those audits. We've been responsible, and we were responsible for it happens, some offsite drift. And I've also been called in when a farmer did it to make an assessment. And those are not pleasant conversations. And when DOA gets there, it's really not a pleasant conversation, because those guys come in and They smile the whole time. They're pleasant to deal with, but they have a set of rules that they are there to enforce, and they will very pleasantly do their job. They're not vindictive about it. They're not mean about it. They're very matter of fact about it. But if you break their rules, they are going to fine you. It's that simple. They don't come in looking for problems, but if there's a problem there, they will find it. And if there's a problem in your paperwork, in your logbook, they will find it. So just make sure you do the right thing. It's really simple. Doing the right thing is never the wrong thing. I believe that my entire career. So just make sure you do things the right way. And if it calls for a DRA, use a DRA. If it says no ammoniated nitrogen, no ammoniated nitrogen. Follow the rules. Because
it's always going to reminder a label is law. Like that is that period.
The label's a law. I had a grower call me and he says, I need you to do some spraying for me. This has been several years ago. And I said, okay, what do you need? And he rattled off all this stuff. And at the very end, he said, I want 2 ounces of crossbow in there. And it's post-applied corn. And I'm like, no. Well, you have to. I told you to. I'm like, no, I don't. And I won't. Well, your competitor did it. And I said, well, then call him, have him spray it. And anyway.
Did he? You got to finish the story, Ho.
I called his bluff. And we sprayed it without but honestly, in the river bottoms, post-applied corn, back when trumpet creeper was a big deal, which isn't such a big deal anymore with Roundup Ready crops. We really don't have trumpet creeper like we used to have. When I farmed myself, that might have happened once in a while, but it will get rid of trumpet creeper. Oh man, I just made a bad recommendation. But that's fallow ground. Yeah. Fallow ground, not in crop.
Different situation.
Yes.
Okay, Mike, we're nearing the end. Anything else you want to mention for not only your Southeastern growers out there, but just in general, as you know, many people that might be listening to it, they're just sitting there staring at the planter. I know the more north you get, obviously that's happening. Stephanie said Porter, her brother, was planting yesterday, so it's starting to happen. But any more advice you have to share with us today?
My biggest thing is be safe. Take the time to be safe. Rest. No one can run 24 hours a day for a week in a row, and you shouldn't expect to. So be safe. Take the time to put on the gloves and goggles before you mess with anhydrous ammonia. If you're going to follow the PPE on the crop protection products you're applying. If you're side dressing UAN, put on the gloves and goggles. If you've ever had UAN solution in your eyes, it's not as hard on you as ammonia, but it's not pleasant. Just be safe. Do things the right way. Take the time to be safe. Protect you, protect your family, protect your employees, protect your neighbors. Be a good community member. If you're going to move from one field to the next with an ammonia wagon on a toolbar, get out of the tractor, turn the valve off on the ammonia wagon. I just can't. I mean, I could sit here for the next 45 minutes and give safety advice, mostly because over the last 50 years, I've broken every one of those rules, and I have paid for it about 3 times. Luckily, the last one was close to fatal, but I lived through it. So be careful. There's only one of you, and your operation, I guarantee you, will miss you if you're gone. So just take the time to be careful and be safe and keep those around you safe.
And here's for hoping some rain. If you get a rainy day, maybe that's not a bad thing. You can take a day and go slow a little bit.
I'm going to just say this. A few years ago, well, a long time ago, a local priest in Mount Carmel was told to pray for rain at Mass on Sunday morning. So he the end of his sermon, he prayed for rain. And on the way, as everyone was leaving and speaking to the priest, the guy that had hay down said, "I don't need any rain. Why are we praying for rain?" So from that day forward, that young priest prayed for favorable weather. So what we want to pray for and hope for is favorable weather, because I may need a rain, but some others that's on this podcast may not. Right. So let's hope for favorable weather throughout the state of Illinois and the Midwest going forward.
Mike, I think that's a great way to end it. Thank you.
All right. Good deal.
That's Mike Wilson with the Wabash. Just joking.
Whatever.
I'm just joking. Thanks, Mike. We appreciate you being here.
All right. Thanks a lot, Kelsey. I really enjoyed it.
Thanks for listening to the Field Advisor Podcast. Unbiased, independent agronomy information to keep your farm moving forward. I'm Kelsey Litchfield, your voice from the field. This podcast is funded by the Illinois Soybean Association Checkoff Program. Stay connected with Field Advisor on social media. Follow, like, and share to keep the conversation going. And don't forget to subscribe to the Field Advisor Podcast on your favorite podcast platform.